Out in the wilds of the Arctic Circle lives many creatures, one known as the winter Alkonost. One of the very few left of his kind, Sorcerer spends most of his time relaxing in the privacy of his own home. A lot of humans try to tell me being a hermit is bad for my health. I'm not a human, I don't need to talk so much. My pet rats are more than enough company. With a lot of free times on his hands, he collects stories from all over the globe. I wrote a lot of these. I suppose you can call me a transcribe.
Why'd you say it like that?
My feminine plumage, darling. Transcribe? This is where I keep my favorites. This one here, Tales of Matia, is a selection of mythos written by a political prisoner learning to write. This one, The Great Tongue Oddity, is about the robot man. Sharing them? Oh, I suppose. I'm not opposed to the idea. I am getting old, and it would be a tragedy if these stories died with me. Oh, how about this? Black Nights of Matia. I'll have to read it to you, it's not written in a human language. So settle down, and I'll tell you a story. A story about a place called Matia. Place perhaps true somewhere, not here. In this place, a dreary, cold place, there were many people. These people, they all had something in common. Someone tried to kill them, but they lived. They persisted, and they built a nation on fury, anger, and empathy for all fellow man.
Hi, this is just a quick introduction. You're about to enter I guess you're not entering it, the first episode of Black Nights of Matia. There was a comic that ended up discontinued, and the first entry of this is basically the first chapter of the comic. I'll have a link to that in any description below, but you'll actually get a little more information with this podcast episode than you would with the comic. As a second side note, in case you don't know what 11 Works AU is, which is probably every single one of y'all except for me, it's a series of things where I have the same characters in different universes. These are the same characters from novels I've written, so if you've read a novel and like, hey, are these the same characters? My response is sort of yes. But this is a completely different universe, they were raised differently, so sort of no. I also apologize for any house creaking noise or telephone rings that may occur during this podcast. I do not have a soundproof way to record, and the air conditioning is already off and it is very hot in here. It's summer in Georgia. I don't know what you want from me. Anyway, thank you for listening, and let's get to the podcast, eh? The tunnel beneath the suspiciously warm ground was completely devoid of light or life, save for a bird-masked girl no older than 15 navigating the dark and narrow tunnel with the ease of a soul navigating to heaven. The girl did not care. She was a machine, worthless when without reason and unstoppable with it, motivated to her own end, willing to sacrifice anything for the smallest of tasks. Tied to her were sacks that added to more than her own weight filled with goods that would fill the monstrous, violent tendencies of Matians. The goods were considered so dangerous that the more reasonable Six World officers had deemed them illegal to ship into Matia. But it was not the Six Worlds that had given her a task. The Matians had the girl, the resource more powerful than anyone anticipated. The girl hopped without prompt and popped the trapdoor open from below and grabbed the resulting ledge in one movement. Despite it being beyond her strength, she hoisted herself up with her cargo and found herself in a thick tent. In this thick tent was the girl's favorite material belonging. A bright purple blanket given to her by the man she loved second most in the world that had long faded and gotten so dirty that it only looked purple from a distance. And it was a little toddler wrapped as cozy as a Matian could be. "Yvonne," the girl called to the little boy, and the boy shook awake. The figure above him was dressed in pelts that covered her so entirely that the color of her skin couldn't even be known, and her face was obscured by a large wooden mask. The mask had 2 eye holes, and the skin beneath was painted pitch black to further hide her identity. But part of her identity was that she couldn't hide was that she only had one deep blue eye showing through. "Mom?" Ivan mumbled. He stretched and sat up knowing that time for sleep was over as his smuggling criminal mother reached into his sack. "I got your favorite thing," the girl told the boy, and she took out a high-risk item that warranted the death of any Madian caught carrying it. A fresh tomato. The boy smiled through his slumber and weakly reached up to grab the fruit. He took a big bite of it and savored the juicy nutrients more than any 6-year-old toddler ever would. She picked up the toddler and placed him under a pelt that was designed to camouflage the sacks with the snowy wasteland she had been condemned to for the safety of all mankind. And then, she was off. The machine, the woman that would travel 1,000 miles with a bullet in her chest before dropping dead, a woman that God himself at times could not touch, was off for a task she was given years ago and still fulfilled like clockwork. She ran on built legs for miles before she reached an area she reached once a week, every week. For 2 years, it was rather dead. Like her, everyone in Matia, the criminals, the thieves, the drug dealers, and the good assumed few, lived in tents, gutted cars, homes built crudely from mud or wood, sometimes homes burrowed into the snow in the winter. Of course, of the last month, however, each time the girl found herself in a rapidly developing town. Without tools, the thin, sickly, poverty-ridden Madians that wrote their own demise were raising wooden frames. After that, Mormon quickly, like machines, like gears with no humanity, placed crude mud bricks on either side of the frames and filled the spaces between with dirt that was dug up to level the area. More than 100 times, the men erecting the homes were men packing mud into wooden frames to form the bricks. Their children danced behind them, packing liquid solution and mud to form it into concrete, like a game, and the few women in Matia mostly hauled the formed bricks to crude kilns. The traveler felt jealousy of the children dancing without the weight of their grim situation, but her determination overruled it before the feeling grew. At the sight of the bird-masked traveler, the workers abandoned their post and ran towards their children packing the mud solution and told them to flock to traveler. She gave more to the children. The bird-masked traveler, the dirty food smuggler that slowed the progress of the hard-working 6-year-old's attempts at naturally solving the issue of Madians, threw potatoes, tomatoes, eggs, carrots, even the occasional pepper to the mass of yelling children, as she effortlessly barreled through any that made the mistake of standing directly in her way. Usually, the crowd lasted until she was out of goods, but as it thinned early, she knew without looking that she needed to disappear. Like a bullet, she traveled 20 feet in less than a stride to find herself behind a fully built building, and to her luck a pile of dirt was nearby. She hopped and dug into it to create a little burrow, and threw a pelt over herself in the hole to blend herself into the snowy mound. With her toddler safe in her arms and hidden out of view, she watched a pair of soldiers come onto the main road. She used to pray they would not see her, but the years she could spend caring about her own life had long been spent. With her toddler safe in her arms and hidden out of view, she watched a pair of soldiers come onto the main road. She used to pray they would not see her, but the years she could spend caring about her own life had long been spent. There were 3 soldiers, good soldiers, loyal soldiers, soldiers that weren't just there for the pay benefits like most of the blue coat wearing revolutionaries, soldiers that went above and beyond the call of duty. They wordlessly and independently approached the civilians that were all frozen in fear. The traveler kept her eye on the leanest one, the one with a little C-pin on his chest and stripes on his cuffs, as he approached a frightened woman. His bright Prussian blue coat was so thick and new and colorful against a woman's terrible torn clothes that had been stained and sun-bleached so terribly that whatever color it had once been had been reduced to an ugly pale brown. He held his rifle fitted with a knife so that the blade pointed under her chin. She stood still as she clutched her purse. The captain swung his weapon down and ripped the woman's purse so that he could dig through it. Finding nothing of interest, he reached into the pockets of the woman who knew protesting such loyal soldiers could mean her life. He fetched a pen out of her pocket, inspected it for a moment, and then tossed it into the great hole of her purse before moving on. The other 2 soldiers had frisked 3 Madians each by the time the captain had arrived at a second citizen, but they were not as thorough as the captain, as slick, as intimidating. They didn't take the time to pour such fear into the street that the guilt made themselves obvious. They were always the men trying to look brave. He approached a falsely brave man in a puffy jacket that had long lost its puff. Both elbows had holes worn into it, and the armpit of one had come undone and been crudely fixed with an old paper clip. He stood tall, his chest out and his shoulders back. He stood mean with his fists clenched and his eyes spelling out just how much he hated the men before him. The captain put the blade of his rifle just on the shoulder of the man. Take a moment to look him over before using the blade to knock the jacket down to his elbow and reveal a small bag sewn to his shirt. The brave man stood his ground, with only a slight twitch indicating he'd have tears if he had any water to spare. He knew it was the end, but he also knew he had long been living in the epilogue. The captain swung down with the blade of his weapon and tore slightly into the skin of the man, but more importantly into the hidden sack. Juices splattered, and the enticing scent of fresh produce filled the otherwise barren air. Tomatoes. Fresh tomatoes, lots of them, fetched no doubt by the man's children. The captain could have shot him there, but he wasn't there just for bloodshed. He was there for a message. He reached into the hole and took a sliced tomato into his gloved hand and chuckled, knowing that the sound of the restrained laugh would come out distorted through his heavily tinted face shield. He dropped the tomato before reaching his juice-covered hand to rest on the man's face.
You don't want to die over a tomato, do you?
No, the man answered truthfully. As death grew closer, his primitive urge to fight it grew stronger. He began to shake.
Who's your supplier?
The captain roughly grabbed the man's outgrown hair at the back of his neck to make the man yelp. I don't know, he wears a mask, he pleaded.
Why didn't you take the mask off him? Why didn't you kill him? Do I need to set an example with you?
The traveler, Catherine, young, dumb, and full of vinegar, unbuttoned the pelt from her and left it over Yvonne to keep him hidden as she walked out into the street. The civilians began to all fear for their lives as their food supplier made herself known to the enemy. Although she had avoided being spotted by Six Worlds for years due to her camouflage and the soldier's heavy helmet tint, the soldiers had heard enough stories of the traveler. She came from the north, they said, somewhere where no one lived. Some said she must live amongst the wolves, but every Matia knew better than believe any wildlife still existed in the wasteland. She wore a wooden bird mask that inspired many folk songs, and the dying men and women of Matia with nothing but a string or a bucket to beat in their possession. She came packed with food, and not the non-perishable stolen from trucks just outside the walls, actual produce, carrots, potatoes, grapes, even in the off-season. No one had caught her. In fact, most assumed her to be a man given her deep voice, but there she stood in the street. In a deep voice, and in an accent that had long gone extinct, the traveler shouted, "Y'all gonna get somebody, y'all better get me." Shortly after, she reached up and performed the death sentence. She revealed her face. Young, heavily racially mixed beyond the point of even being able to name the most influential continent. She was but a teenager, a mere child that hadn't finished puberty, and still had the face of an infant. Her hair was long and unruly in a shade of blonde that didn't seem to match her skin tone. Most notably, she was fat. Not by Six World standards, but to a Madian, a round face was rare and inspired envy. "I survived an atom bomb, and fuck you, I'll survive this."
Ugh.
The captain laughed in frustration at the realization that he had been bested for 2 years by a literal child. But he also knew that desperate times could turn anyone into a terrorist. He gestured for the other 2 guards to flank her, and they grabbed her by either shoulder with no resistance.
If the resistance thinks sending little girls to do their food smuggling will make us go easy, well, I think you'll make a beautiful example.
The captain put his rifle away into the awkwardly placed sling on his back before pulling out his baton. The traveler knew better than to fight. She had died a long time ago. She was simply too stubborn to stop moving. Deeper in the city was a large palace. The 6 worlds hated the palace. It was grand and had running water, and was the first building in line in Matia to receive power. And there, the second most controversial man lived. Self-proclaimed Chief of Matia, a demon named Balthazar Sandri III, ruled the wasteland with an iron fist. The 6 worlds had heard their rumors about the dictator, how anyone that crossed him ended up dead, that he ate regularly as his people starved, that he lived in a 10-bedroom mansion while living in the poorest nation in the world. Even the civilians of Matia had heard a few and believed them. The 6 world soldiers knew better. Sandri wasn't some mystical evil born of sulfur and redwood, but rather he was a deathly thin man like most Matians that lived in a 10-bedroom home that was littered with trash every morning, given that he let as many Matians as could fit in the manor sleep there to get out of the harsh winter. Many soldiers even appreciated Sandri. Sure, he fought tooth and nail against everything the 6 world party stood for, but he was determined. He had a plan and he stuck to it. The man had been through hells no god could ever conjure, and came out still mostly sane. A 5-star general, he stood at a desk with no chair as he tipped a spoon of coffee grounds into the mug that provided the only clutter on his desk.
I sure do love coffee, the mostly sane man announced to himself. Sure wish I had some clean water to make it with.
The door to his office swung open and there stood a tiny little man. At 4'9" and 65 pounds, Rick U. Moslaw was a skeleton of a man whose stomach was swollen from poverty. He was dressed in an intricate jacket designed for form over function, although it was stained as the man who wore it was blind and often did not notice he had spilled something on it until it was too late to clean it. His hair was a cream color from his albinism and was greasy from his nearly non-existent access to water. An attempt to make the man look better, Sandri had slicked the blind man's hair back, but there was nothing he could do to fix the sunken eyes and an occasional fainting spell from malnutrition.
Morning report, Rick announced. Oh, hi Rick. Our town's coming along nicely, huh?
Balthazar smiled to the side to keep from obstructing the view in his only eye. He then took a pull from his mug of coffee grounds before looking down in disgust.
Well, it's terrible.
He took another pull for the rest of the coffee grounds and put the cup down. Rick was unbothered by whatever it was Balthazar was going on about. Everything is terrible, he grumbled in his irritability from his low blood sugar. The 6 worlds are furious that we built this town. Since the Matian Constitution was signed, we've found the bodies of 7 food smugglers. Our live ones have stopped going out because they're scared of a little murder now.
Now that we're no longer freezing to death, they're trying to starve us. Starting to think they built this ghetto to kill us, Balthazar joked.
Come with me, Sandri. Rick power walked as he always did to grab a hold of Balthazar's sleeve and led him out into the hall. The clicks of Balthazar's tall walking stick was calming to Rurik as they echoed through the hall he could not see. It helped him tell where the walls were, and more importantly, where Balthazar was. Sandri, Nilonagi wanted to speak with you. She requested to see you Sunday night.
I can't do Sunday night, Balthazar explained. Killing myself Sunday night. Write her in for Monday morning.
Rick took a small journal from a fold in his jacket as well as a pen and scribbled. Alright, I got it down for Monday morning and therapy for you Sunday afternoon.
Good call.
And Sandri?
Yeah?
I'm blind. Rick turned the book to show it to the giant man he walked with and Balthazar laughed at the scribbles.
Oh yeah.
Balthazar stopped when he reached a spot dimly lit by a window as a man decked out in a plethora of jackets finished a seam on a project hung on a curtain rod. The man turned to face his leader. "Hey Chief Sandry, how's this for the Madian flag?" Balthazar squinted at the flag. It resembled a blue wave clashing on a red background with white stars being flooded in. "Kinda clashy," he critiqued. "And hard to replicate. Our flag should be easy to recreate." The flag maker nodded in agreement. "Well, I think it's beautiful," Rook noted. "Come on, Helga needs to drive us out to check the town projects." Balthazar patted Rook gently on the back and nearly sent the little man tumbling forward. The two walked away and out of their palace, where they mounted into a jeep missing a door in its roof. The driver was bundled so that only her eyes were showing, and even they were covered by snow goggles. Despite her precautions, she was still shivering as the soft flakes let themselves into the vehicle. "I hate how cold it gets here," she complained as her president loaded into the back seat and helped his blind coworker in. "Yeah, much colder here than in my home in Germany," Balthazar commented. Rook shed his jacket and relaxed. The jeep roared to life on the third attempt to start it and chugged along the path dug out from the snow. The town was going smoothly, as it seemed. There were much more six-year-old soldiers than usual patrolling and terrorizing the poor citizens of Matia just trying to survive, but the houses were being built with incredible speed. "We might survive this winter better than I previously thought," Balthazar mumbled. "Whoa!" Helga pumped the brakes hard and sent the jeep into an angle before it finally stopped on the slippery road. Before Rook and Balthazar could get their bearings, Helga jumped out of the jeep and kneeled before it. Balthazar helped Rook out of the car before he went on to investigate what Helga had freaked out about. There, with a light powdering of snow built upon her, was the body of a teenage girl. A mere child. Next to her was a snapped wooden bird mask, and Balthazar's heart dropped when he realized he was looking at Matia's best food smuggler. Never expected her to be a child. Worse yet, a toddler was crying over the body, weeping loudly and shivering in the cold as none of the workers paid him mind. Yvonne cried and Rook stopped to pick him up. The child calmed to a sob as he grabbed a hold of Rook's worn-down shirt and buried his face into the man's feverish warmth. "Why is no one stopping for her?" Helga worried. Balthazar looked up at a duo of patrolling soldiers. "She was a message. Trying to help her would get the average Madian killed, but those soldiers won't mess with me." He looked at the poor child. Oh, she was just a teen. Her eyes were closed. She had a large cut that tore through her coat and shirt and down their skin deep enough to reveal her ribs. Her face was red and bruised and her jaw was badly damaged. "Beaten to death." He calmly reached down to pick her up and to move the body, but he noticed it was warm and limber despite the snow falling on her. "She died recently." "No." He put his head to her chest. "Holy shit, she's still alive. We have to get her out of this cold." He ran to the jeep and stole Rook's jacket to cover up the indecency the six-year-old soldiers had given her by tearing up her clothes, and as he tried to get the oddly complex clothes on, the teen stirred and opened her eyes. "She's awake!" Balthazar exclaimed in joy. She sat up and gave Balthazar a punch to the jaw so unexpectedly that he stumbled backwards and fell on Helga, who caught him. "Oh shit," the girl slurred. "I thought she was someone else." With that, she passed back out. When she came to, she found herself in a cold room that was out of the wind and snow. She stirred until she woke enough to know that she was in terrible pain. She felt her face with her hands and found stitches and swelling. The shirt she was wearing was not her own, and was far too big for her. "Yvonne," she called her injured John. "Yvonne, where are you?" "Here," a little voice called out. The bird-masked traveler, bare of both her mask and travel, looked to the side and saw her little boy illuminated by the dim light of an oil lamp. He was happily munching on a tomato, and sat in the lap of a weirdly small but full-grown stranger with a swollen stomach. The stranger was cleaning a bloody medical tool as if he didn't care he had a baby in arm's reach of it. The traveler weakly looked at some taller, bigger movement. There stood a giant, easily 6'6" and muscular for a poverty-ridden Madian, but still very thin. He was pouring water into a dirty mug from a steaming teapot. When the man turned and smiled at her, she was frightened by his sharp teeth and empty eye socket.
You want some water? It hasn't cooled off yet.
Before she could respond, Rook jumped in and made a new conversation. Oh, we weren't expecting you to live. Sad, you would have made great martyr.
He's joshing with you.
Balthazar assured the injured teen. He set the cup of hot water on the table beside her. The traveler found that no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't seem to move much. She couldn't lift her legs. She couldn't sit up. She just struggled endlessly as her wounds opened.
You shouldn't move so much,
Balthazar warned.
And we're very sorry. I'll do better to protect our food smugglers. This I promise. What's your name?
Catherine Young, the girl answered.
I know you. She squinted. You're that guy Potty the Great hates.
Balthazar burst into laughter at the unexpected jab at character.
I prefer youngest chancellor in Germany's history, 5-star general, current chief of Matia, but yeah, that too.
Kate shrugged. You're on a first-name basis with my father, Rook noted. Did you know him? Kate tried to sit up and failed once again in shock. As she struggled, her arms knocked over the cup of hot water, and she yelped before panicking more.
Prince Rurik, I am so sorry. I'm not usually this clumsy,
she promised as she took her blanket and tried to clean it. Balthazar saw fear in the woman's eyes, so he picked up the cup and gently shooed Kate away from the mess.
I'll get it. You need to rest.
Yes, please do not worry, Catherine, Rurik seconded. The child is smearing tomato juice on me as we speak. We mean to help you, not to enslave you.
Your father was very clear on my position to the Moslavs,
Kate explained as she tried to get back up but was easily kept back down by Balthazar.
Paddy had me guarding the supplies he left so he could give them to you, but he never showed me to you. I need to take you to them. If Paddy hid supplies here?
Balthazar gasped. He turned to anger.
We've been building this city with mud and we had supplies the whole time?
Sandry, you paid him to hide supplies in Siberia in case the Six-Worlds cornered us here. Which, they did. Good call.
Well, yeah, but I thought he took the money and ran.
Honestly, so did I.
Sirs, it's here. It's just north. I can take you there. Absolutely not,
Balthazar told her with a sudden switch back to motherly.
You stay here and eat some soup.
No, she can take us, Rook started. So long as she can pass a little physical test. Balthazar turned and gave Rurik a warning smile with his unusually sharp teeth.
Rurik?
First, lift your left foot.
Rurik.
Then your right foot.
Rick, I swear to God I will kill you.
Then realize amputated both from injury and frost damage.
Rurik, you son of a bitch, I told you to drop it softly, not as a joke.
Oh, calm down, you baboon. Kate defended Rurik.
I thought it was appropriate. It was an attempt to make light of my dire situation.
Yes, it's a joke, not soft, Sandry.
Sandry, I rather appreciated the effort to make it more whimsical. It didn't work, but I appreciated the attempt.
Oh, my apologies, Catherine.
No harm done, Mr. Rurik. Oh my God, there's two of them, Balthazar mumbled. No wonder your little brother took to Rurik so immediately. What? Ivan's not my little brother, he's my son, he came out of me.
Balthazar looked at the girl on the couch, and then the 2-year-old on Rurik's lap.
Oh, you're older than I thought. What, are you 20, 21?
I'm 15. Balthazar swelled with rage, but contained it only to let out a growl.
Where's your daddy? I have some words for him.
Kate shrugged.
I haven't seen him since a body bought me off the coal line. He's probably dead and buried in a POW camp back in Texas. Your mom? Oh, she's definitely dead. Ivan's dad? He just left one day and never came back.
Balthazar looked at Rook, and although Rook couldn't see Balthazar, he knew he was being looked at. Sandry, we do not have the resources to take her in.
Fine, give her Yvonne back.
Rook dropped the medical tool, having missed the tray by an inch, and hugged the giggling toddler. No, he's my ugly little goblin. The unmistakable sound of heels clicking on the hardwood rung through the room, and Rook knew who had just entered. Kate looked at the unfamiliar woman who had grown thin like all Madians, but still looked full of life. She appeared to be older than Balthazar, but had aged far better, and she had a bowl in one hand and a medical cane in the other. I brought some caribou stock for the poor girl. And you forgot your cane in the kitchen, sweetie. The woman approached a blushing Balthazar and kissed him on the cheek.
Thanks, Mom.
Balthazar told his mother before receiving his cane. He liked his big walking stick better, but the medical cane was much better for his back. And here's you little food, dear. Alexandria Sandry kneeled by the couch and helped Kate to sit against the arm enough to drink from the bowl.
Thank you, ma'am.
Kate thanked before she drank the soup. She was not hungry, but she was thirsty. Call me Grandma Alex, dear.
Ah, she's on my side,
Balthazar teased Rook. Ah, no, Alex. My only weakness. Oh, you two better not put this poor girl back on the street with no legs and little Yvonne.
How much of our conversation did you hear?
I've been standing by the door since you woke up. I've heard all of it. And she needs more than a house, dear. She needs a parental figure.
Mooty, you know why I can't do that.
Rook laughed. And Rook, I think this is a great time for you to learn about family. Oh. Rook stopped laughing.
Ma'am, I don't need a guardian,
Kate protested. I'm just a servant of the Moslovs. I've gotten by fine by myself. Fine? You're nearly killed. Look at you. They found you half naked and covered in snow, beaten within an inch of your life. You're not doing fine. Well, you're well fed at least. She's not my servant, Rook explained to Alex, despite knowing he didn't need to. I don't do servants. I know, Rook. I just wanted to make sure. I don't need to get hung.
Miss Alex, I really do appreciate it, but
I'm a waste of time. A servant doesn't need rearing. My parents were dumb, so I'm about as smart as I can get, and trying to learn me something is just going to end in frustration. Alex glared at Kate in misplaced aggression. How long were you in that POW camp in Texas?
My mom was arrested for crossing over from the Southern Confederacy while pregnant with me, Kate explained. I was born there and lived there until I was 11 and got injured in an explosion.
She pushed a blanket down and pulled her shirt up to show a burn scar surrounding a weird dip in her stomach.
I got impaled by a doorframe, but a potty bribed a doctor to fix me up and shipped me here.
Alex got stern and put her hands on her hips. Intelligence isn't genetic, and don't call a junior dumb.
Mom, she's not my kid.
Don't talk back to me, Junior. Alex softened. Kate, it's not about being efficient. You're too young to be worried about work and raising a kid on your own. You sit here and rest off your injuries, and I'll send the boys to see about your materials. Kate felt a little overwhelmed by the motherly presence.
Okay.
Alex leaned down and gave Kate a little kiss on the forehead. When Balthazar and Rook went to scout for the supplies Apati had entrusted Kate with, they found her tent covering a trap door that led to a long, dark tunnel. Down it they traveled until the tunnel grew warm, then uncomfortably hot. When they finally reached a lit portion, the tunnel spilled out to a closed-off cave lit by electricity and with a gray water system cycling through, complete with school lockers modified with heaters and more water to grow plants from all corners of the world. Lying dormant were jars of preserves lining the walls and bags of seeds littering the floor. Shoved in unlit areas of the cave were old solar panels mixed-matched and possibly salvaged from Apati's old home in Korea. All beneath the Siberian wasteland.